share button at the bottom of the screen.
Okay,
Feel free to try that one out.
okay.
Hey, I see we have Matt with us too. Evening, sir. I see Emily.
Hello. You saw my desk for a minute, but here I am.
Now I only saw what I'm seeing right now.
Oh, good.
You've got the wonderful backlighting and everything. You know,
I've been doing a lot of these.
You win the award for background, but you win an award.
Thank you.
Of course.
You also have the state of Connecticut map there that's visible, which is just perfect for this meeting.
It is actually, sorry, are we like recording and on the record? Stop. I won't talk about my decor.
Correct us if we are. I don't think we are.
It's a map of all the waterways in Connecticut, which is especially appropriate for this group.
Oh, yes. Wow.
It's really cool.
That's even better. Before we start, maybe I should do it when we're on the record so you're on the hook for it, but volunteer note taker. Do we have any volunteers this time around? Anyone will do a better job than I did in terms of timeliness in the last one.
You did a great job, Matt. Shouldn't sell yourself short. It was very thorough and accurate.
I was going to say, I can try and take them, but my internet has been horrible, and I'm like only catching snippets of what people are saying. So I don't know if I would be the best note taker in this situation.
Just let's you and me collaborate.
Okay.
Sorry, was that Emily?
All right.
We'll collaborate because I've got like kid noise, so I don't trust myself either. But between the two of us, we've got it covered.
Awesome. I'm at the end of my Wi-Fi range, so that's why I'm in by phone as well right now. So even if my face freezes, I can hear. So I'll supplement the notes. 1 more minute tops, and then we'll get going with Harvard TV. And this is a good one this evening because a couple of guests who are with us tonight are going to do the work for us for the first portion, and we can kick back and learn a few things. It sounds like just froze. Your chat came across. All right, I suppose we can queue up to get started. And just give me a countdown whenever the appropriate person is ready.
Yep, you guys are set whenever you're ready.
I think we're good. And let me know. Just a moment. I got a commission member calling on the other line. He must be trying to get in, so I'm not sure if we're on yet, but one moment, please. Hey, am I audible once again?
Good, Matt.
Thank you. I just got a call from one commission member, and I believe the initial invitation that was sent out from the town 5 days ago might have hit some spam filters, so I'm just going to send that out as we speak, and then we should be joined by a couple of additional commission members. And it is sent. And am I correct in assuming that we're already started and we should proceed?
Yes, we're live, so you can start whenever you're ready.
Thank you. So good evening. I'm Matt Masunis with the Conservation Environment Commission. I'd like to welcome everyone tonight to the November 30th, 2020 virtual meeting. The required meeting agenda and applicable materials are available on the town website. Because in-person attendance at public meetings is likely to increase the risk of transmission of COVID-19, this hearing is being conducted in accordance with Governor Lamont's Executive Order 7B and 7I. For the record, I'll now call the roll. Emily Scott. And audio confirmation will suffice.
Yes, present.
Present. Emily Sexton. Not present. Jessica Schaefer-Helmecki.
Present.
The record will reflect present. Rick Bush. Not present. Skipping Ronnie Rodman, she might be joining in just a moment. I see Sean Daly. And an
Present.
audio confirmation. Good evening, sir. And if she shows in the next 5 minutes, Ronnie Rodman as well, given that some folks were having issues with finding the login email, a function of the virtual meeting environment that we currently live in now. So for the record, I'd like to note that we have a quorum of the commission. Commission members and town staff are participating by WebEx. Members of the public can view the meeting live on West Hartford Community Television or on West Hartford Community Interactive Comcast Channel 5 and Frontier TV Channel 6098 or at www.whtv.org. The meeting is also being recorded for on-demand viewing, which will be available on the town's website. Because of the virtual format of this meeting, there are some special rules and procedures that I need to cover before I begin. First, I ask all participants to please mute the microphones on your devices when you're not speaking. Second, pursuant to Executive Order 7B, all speakers must state their name and title each time they speak. Also, I'll ask members of the commission and there is no applicant tonight, fortunately, but all members of the commission to not address other participants directly. Questions and requests for information must be made through the chair. After, state your name and simply preface your question and comment with through the chair. And when you are done, I will recognize the person who is most appropriate to respond. Although these practices may feel rigid and awkward, they will ensure the orderly meeting is conducted, or will ensure the meeting is conducted in an orderly fashion, and that the members of the public who are listening can understand the discussion. I'd like to conclude by thanking everyone in advance for your patience. This is our third virtual public meeting, I believe, and there are bound to be some bumps and glitches along the way, but we remain committed to the principles of open and transparent government. So now that we've taken the roll, matters of...
Matt, just a question to the chair from Commissioner Ted Newton. I don't know that you called me during the roll call, but I just want to say I am here, present.
Fantastic, Mr. Newton.
And willing to participate, so...
You got to stick up for yourself. No one else does. That's fantastic. I was reading from a list, actually, that has a name on it that is no longer with us. So I'll announce at this portion of the agenda, Stephanie Keohane has been with this commission since 2014. She's stepping down, citing a mix of work and family obligations, held in high esteem. And on behalf of this commission, I'd like to thank her for her service as we wish her the best in her endeavors. So moving on to agenda item, new business number 3, our first presentation of the night. We have invited Mark Riccio here from Highland Electric Bus to give a presentation on potential fuel propulsion types for school transit. This is an issue that's come up conversationally with this commission before, and that we know the Clean Energy Commission is also taking a look at. So we were interested in viewing this through an environmental screen on what is the technology out there in the marketplace, and how should we be thinking about this, essentially. And I felt that given Mark's previous current experience and also previous experience working for a all-fuels school bus manufacturer, he would have a good read on this for us. With that, Mr. Riccio, I'll give you control. Please use the share function at the bottom of the screen in order to begin presenting. Thank you.
Perfect. Can you, y'all see my screen, screen 2?
Yes.
Doesn't background, and now you see a blue background.
Mm-hmm.
Can you
Yes.
see it? Good?
We can.
Wonderful. So good evening. I'd like to, thank Matt and the commission for having me tonight. My name is Mark Riccio. I'm the Vice President of Sales for Honda Electric Transportation. We're a comprehensive turnkey solutions provider for electric school bus. Our corporate headquarters is in South Hamilton, Massachusetts, which is just outside of Boston. The company's been around for about 2 years. We're currently active in over a dozen states, and we work with end user school districts and also with third-party fleet managers that manage school bus services for the districts. We call them 3PMs, and short for third-party fleet managers. And tonight I'm going to talk a little bit about, the market as a whole, the different fuel types that are out there, and maybe a little bit about what we do. I can dive into that maybe afterwards a bit as well. So, you will be receiving a copy of this presentation, and by all means, if you have any questions, feel free to interject. So if you think about school bus throughout the United States, the industry is actually quite large. There's currently about 480,000 units that are actively deployed in the United States that transport about 26 million pupils safely to and from school every day. The school bus is actually the safest form of transportation on the road when you look at the statistics nationally. About 90% of those buses, over 90% of those actually, buses that are active on the road today are diesel. If you take a look at the state of Connecticut, your state has about 8,600 buses, and you transport about 467,000 pupils on a daily basis in your state. If you think about the different types of buses that are out there, there's really 3 main types. There's what we call a type A bus, which is a short bus, which is on a cutaway chassis. It's typically a Ford or a GM chassis that has a body that's assembled onto it. Then you have a type C bus, which most of you are probably used to seeing, which is your conventional bus that has the extended, elongated engine compartment in front of the bus. And then we have what's called a type D bus, which is more of a transit style bus, which is a flat front, which has a tighter turning radius and a higher passenger capacity. And, if you think about the school bus market, it's very, very traditional. It moves at a very glacial pace. Diesel's really been the predominant fuel type for about the last 3 decades. In my former role, I worked for the Bluebird Corporation as the alternative fuels manager. And there are some fuel technologies that are out there right now. They're very much in the minority, but there's some very exciting things that are developing on this front. If we take a look at, the base level or, the entry point product for this market, it's actually gasoline, which in the school bus market, this is going to sound like an oxymoron, but actually we consider gasoline in our market an alternative fuel because it's non-diesel. So that kind of tells you a little bit about the perception of this market and fuel types. But gasoline actually was the first fuel type that was utilized in the school bus market way back in its inception. And it's really come around again in the last, I would say, probably 5 years. It's the cheapest entry point product, obviously, for an internal combustion engine product. Current market share of this product is about 10% to 12%. You have the lowest upfront acquisition cost with gasoline. You have a slightly lower fuel price versus diesel. And, you know, there is a cost benefit if this is piggybacked with incumbent gas. So if you have a district that is tied to a city facility that has a fuel depot that has gas, it obviously is something that can be advantageously leveraged. It does have a lower miles per gallon versus diesel. Comes in around, you know, 5.5 miles versus, you know, it's over 7 sometimes for diesel. So, you know, everything old is new again in that, you know, gas has come around. It's a very cheap entry point. So a lot of the OEM manufacturers, and there are 3 of them primarily in the United States, which consists of Bluebird, which is a manufacturer down in Georgia. You have IC Bus, which is a manufacturer located in Tulsa, Oklahoma. You have Thomas Bus, which is a manufacturer in High Point, North Carolina. So, you know, between the 3 of these organizations or OEMs, their cheapest entry point is gas. So if they're going in and they're trying to make a very aggressive deal, per se, to a school district or a third-party fleet manager, this would be the option that they would generally try to introduce first. The next fuel type that has really gained a lot of momentum over the last several years is propane. Right now, I would say propane is king of the alternative fuels when it comes to the school bus market. If you take a look at the technology, it's been around since about 2012. And through Bluebird, they're currently on Gen 5 of the product. This product captures about 6 to 7% of the market share. Some of the advantages of propane is that it's domestically sourced and produced. An overwhelming majority of it comes from North America. One of the largest actual reserves is actually the Marcellus Shale Reserve, which is pretty much the whole state of Pennsylvania, which is extracting propane, and down in Texas. The infrastructure pretty much is already in place for propane. There's really not much that a bus depot has to do to put in the infrastructure or change or modify. The obvious cost advantages are that it's much less than gas. It's about 40 to 50% less overall. And it also has a lower acquisition cost comparable to that of diesel. And if you take a look at the total cost of ownership, or what we refer to as TCO, propane is very, very favorable from a maintenance cost saving standpoint versus diesel, which has very stringent emissions criteria, which is going to continue to become more so as the EPA institutes stricter and stricter forms of emission standards from now until about 2027. So if you think about a diesel engine, it has a lot of additive features and equipment on the engine to reduce the NOx and the emissions and the particulate matter, and all of that costs more money. It adds complexity to the system. Propane is less complex, it's easier to maintain, and you have a lower total cost of ownership profile. If you look at the TCO for an average propane bus versus diesel over its lifetime, which is about 15 years, it's about 10 years in Connecticut, but overall in the US, it's about 15 years. The cost savings of propane versus diesel is actually somewhere between $40,000 to $60,000 in cost savings over its life versus that of diesel. It's very safe, one of the safest forms of fuel that's out there. It's non-toxic, non-carcinogenic, non-corrosive. You know, right now you have a 0.01 NOx option with this fuel, which is almost virtually, you know, NOx-free, which is great. So, you know, there's a lot of choices out there in terms of this particular product from the manufacturers, and it continues to grow in popularity. And there's a lot of incentives that are out there through Volkswagen as well. That's predicated upon low NOx, and this absolutely fires on, you know, all cylinders when it comes to that. No pun intended. Any questions thus far from anyone? Okay.
Chairman, this is Commissioner Daly. I'd like to ask a question.
Sure.
Please proceed.
Sean Daly, Commissioner. Thanks for the presentation so far. This is great information. question is then, if propane is so great, why isn't it being used? I've heard that propane actually produces less energy than gas, which is one of the major reasons why it's not being used.
Yeah, it has a lower BTU, British thermal unit number than that of gas. However, if you look at the overall comparison between gas and propane, you're going to come in much cheaper on a new gas bus versus a propane. A propane bus typically is going to be anywhere from about $5,000 to $10,000 more expensive than a diesel. But what you really have to think about is the total cost of ownership as it applies to the life of the bus. If you're taking a look, for the long term, owning that product over its lifetime, actually propane is much more advantageous when it comes to the maintenance cost savings aspects and fuel savings aspects, and obviously environmental benefits versus that of gas or even diesel. So just a couple of things to keep in mind. Right now in the market, there's probably, I would say, I know Bluebird had close to about 27 to 30,000 units out there, all told and said. I would say you're looking at probably about 30 to 35,000 units out there, maybe a little bit more in terms of propane in the market. So it's a great product, still gaining traction. Like I said, it's on Gen 5. The engine is pretty much bulletproof. The system itself, actually, the fueling system is very, very safe. It's one of the safest fueling systems out there, actually. The tanks are tested to very, very high standards. And I've actually seen a test where they actually took a full propane tank, put it in an open flame on high heat. And actually, a very interesting thing occurs when you superheat propane in a compressed tank. It actually condenses, which produces frost on the outside of the tank. It's pretty interesting to see, something you put into fire that produces frost outside the actual tank itself. So absolutely number one alt fuel option out there in the market today by far. Another product that's been, yeah.
Sorry, one other just quick follow-up question. I don't want to deter you from this from the presentation, but
sure.
So you mentioned obviously gasoline was the original, and then everything changed to diesel. I have an idea as to why that happened, but maybe you could talk a little bit as to why.
Yeah. So the transition from gas
to diesel.
Yeah, the transition from gas to diesel really happened in the 70s during the fuel crisis, when there was a shortage of that type of fuel. And, when we came out of it, actually, diesel prices were actually much, much lower than that of traditional gas. So that was the main reason why there was a transfer or a shift from traditional gas to diesel at that point. The fuel type itself was much less expensive, and it held that position in the market for, a few decades, almost 3 decades. So, if you think about present condition, diesel's just about on par with, regular gas these days. But back in its heyday, it was a very, very cost efficient and effective option versus traditional gasoline fuel. Does that answer your question? Good. Yes. Next fuel type that's really out there is compressed natural gas, or CNG. Again, a very slim margin in terms of overall market share. You have less than 1% market share penetration with this product. Again, compressed natural gas is domestically sourced. You're going to gain fuel cost savings versus diesel. CNG is more expensive than propane to get into the market. And, the infrastructure costs, if you lack any type of infrastructure and you were to implement a new infrastructure for CNG, it's very, very cost prohibitive. So typically we see this technology being implemented with school districts that are piggybacking off of an existing transit authority, or an MTA for public service, that already has the infrastructure for CNG in place. If a district really, or a third-party fleet manager for that matter, wanted to implement a depot from the ground up, it would cost probably north of $750,000 to $1 million, because there's a lot of specialty equipment that you need because the fuel and the fumes are pretty volatile. So, what we generally see are a lot of these entities that piggyback off of an incumbent, transit infrastructure that's already in place. If that's the case, then the total cost of ownership on this actually is much more efficient than that of even propane. But due to the fact that you really do have to have the infrastructure in place, it's very cost prohibitive, which is why it has such a low market share. It is more efficient than diesel. It has a much higher BTU versus that of diesel, and it gives you more MPG. It has a better TCO versus diesel in terms of maintenance, and it does have lower emissions as well, similar to that of propane, which is great. Again, I could probably count, when I was at Bluebird, I could count probably on two hands how many CNG deals we actually did. It's just very cost prohibitive for the infrastructure that's required. And, a new emergent technology that's really, really exciting that my organization actually specializes in is electric. So, right now in the market, there's probably, I would say, north of probably 500 to 600 electric school buses that are out there in terms of rubber on the road and operation through the manufacturers. Bluebird is a market leader in this space. Thomas Bus is a market leader as well. IC Bus is coming online with their product. There's also a couple of other players in the market for full-size buses. There's Lion Bus, which is located in Canada and Quebec, and they're sponsored by the Canadian government and also Quebec Hydro. They make a Type C unit that has a composite body that's electric. And then there are some Type A manufacturers, such as Collins Bus out in Kansas, which is part of the Rev Group, Microbird, which is also in Quebec, which is a sister company, Type A manufacturer of Bluebird, and you have Transtech in Warwick, New York, which is also a Type A manufacturer. Obviously, with electric, you're completely doing away with pollution. So you're 100% emissions-free from tailpipe with this product. Essentially, it's going to have a very significant positive environmental impact from day one when it's deployed from the vehicle itself. The maintenance is virtually almost non-existent for your first couple of years on this product. If you think about the fact that a typical ICE engine or internal combustion engine has about 2,000 moving parts and pieces, an electric school bus has probably less than 1% of those moving parts and pieces. So there's just far less to maintain, and that can go wrong with these units. The upfront acquisition cost delta is about threefold or three times that of a traditional diesel, which makes it very prohibitive if you're going to acquire this without trying to secure some type of grant funding or some other aspect of acquisition. There are range limitations. The average range on these units right now is about 100 miles. The battery packs right now in the market range for the full-size units range anywhere from about 150 kilowatt hours to about 220 kilowatt hours. There is regenerative braking with this product, which means anytime the bus is moving forward with inertia over 5 to 10 miles an hour, as long as you're not braking, you're recapturing energy actually back into the battery. And with a properly trained driver in regen, we've seen it gains anywhere back from about 7 to 13% for a recapture rate on a daily AM/PM route cycle. There's also the ability to bidirectionally charge and discharge these units, which brings in an aspect called vehicle to grid, or V to G, which is pretty interesting, whereby you can sell excess energy back into the grid. You can utilize a school bus as a distributed energy resource, or a DER, and you can also incorporate this technology with solar or potentially wind to have what we call a semi-closed loop or closed loop microgrid. So if you think about a school bus in its daily route cycle, it's very, very predictable. It goes out in the AM or the morning route, picks up student pupils, transports them, drops them off, comes back in the early afternoon back to its depot. It could potentially charge or discharge at that time, and then it goes out in the early afternoon to pick up students from school to drop them off. Comes back in the evening, it's dormant, it can charge and discharge. And seasonally, if you think about the route cycle, an overwhelming majority of these units are dormant in the summer. So if you think about it, it's really the perfect model for an electric utility to tap into as a distributed energy resource because it has a daily and seasonal predictive route model, especially in the summer months when these electric utilities actually have to cover peak load. So say when everybody comes home and turns their air conditioners on, these electrical utilities only have finite generating capacity for electricity, and they have to get the electricity from somewhere else, typically from peaker plants, which are almost like third parties or mercenaries that they have to subcontract energy usage from, and it's extraordinarily expensive. If they don't do that, you potentially have the risk of a brownout or a blackout, which relatively is non-existent, fortunately, in the grid, but it's very, very expensive. So if you think about an electric school bus, realistically, it's a distributed energy resource that can be tapped into with a V2G aspect for these utilities. That happens in the summer months. So an example I can give you is a solution that we incorporated in our backyard in Beverly, Massachusetts. The particular fleet had aspirations to electrify over time in a programmatic manner up to 24 units. So we worked with the district, and our model is predicated upon delivering electric on par with what they're currently paying present condition for total cost of ownership as it applies to diesel. And the way that we do that is we leverage our money up front on our side of the fence for the infrastructure to cover the incremental cost gap. And we also leverage grant dollars. So in the case of Beverly, Massachusetts, we had a broad coalition of stakeholders that participated in it, all the way from the mayor, whose name was Mike Cahill, who's a very progressive climate mayor. We engaged the school district itself, all the way from the transportation director to the school board to the CBO or the CFO, the business individual with the district. We engaged the Clean Cities Coalition folks in Massachusetts. And also importantly, we engaged Mass DEP, the Department of Environmental Protection. That was the facilitator of VW grant funds that provided a grant for us to leverage to offset some of that upfront incremental cost that help us deliver our model predicated upon budget neutrality to the school district. And most importantly, we worked with National Grid, who was the electric utility that developed a daily dispatch program whereby they will be tapping these buses via V2G as DERs or distributed energy resources during those peak summer months for instances of needing electricity to cover what we call the duck curve in the energy industry, which is when demand is the greatest, typically in summer months, usually after about 4 p.m. when everyone comes home in the evening. So, all in all, there's an opportunity for this technology to really be a game changer from the aspect of providing very, very clean energy for the students themselves who are on the buses, but also as a distributed energy resource, which is actually an ideal tool for these electrical utilities to sell their electrons. So I actually see this technology becoming more ascendant in the market, probably within the next 12 to 36 months. I don't ever think there's going to be cost parity with diesel with electric, but it's actually going to come down fairly substantially over the next several years, because if you think about the fact that there will be further market penetration with this product based on volume, and the OEMs will have better economies of scale from a manufacturing standpoint on their respective lines, the cost will come down. It's just the way technology is and the technology curve. There's also a lot of grant incentives that are out there currently through the Volkswagen Mitigation Trust. I know Connecticut is on the verge of going public with theirs through CT Deep. And there's also been a change, obviously, if you've been paying attention to the news through the presidency, through the Biden administration, that's going to be coming online hopefully soon. There's going to be some substantive programs that are going to be released that will serve as further forms of catalyst for this technology. And even if those dry up eventually, I personally feel that the baton will be handed off and inherited wholeheartedly by the electrical utilities because they're starting to really understand that these buses present an opportunity for them to sell their electrons in a very, very efficient, localized, and regionalized way. So that's essentially kind of a primer on alternative fuel types in the market today. And, I'll take any further questions you may have. And thank you for your time.
Mark, that was awesome. Let me lead off and then kick it over to everybody else. I just have one quick question that had to do on the electric side. You mentioned that there's virtually no maintenance regime required on these during the first couple of years. Is that because, and I noticed that, term of phrase used, is that because of the observables that the on-road fleet has only been out there for the first couple of years? Or is that, manufacturers' test conditions, and then after the first few years, it drops to a non-zero but still low amount or something like that? I was just wondering if it's one or the other.
Yeah. So if you think about the fact that these buses don't have a powertrain, so there's no transmission, there's no oil changes, you're training drivers to employ driving methodology tied to regenerative braking, which means they're conserving the brakes as well, so they're not changing those out as frequently. There's just far, far less that has to be done with these units from a standpoint of a periodic maintenance regime versus a traditional diesel bus or gas bus, propane bus, or CNG bus. So there's just far less. If you think about the two main systems on these units, the two most expensive components are the battery systems and the electric drive motors, both of which are covered typically from the OEMs for a period of about 5 years, bumper to bumper. I know most of the OEMs are now going to an 8-year warranty on the bus batteries themselves and the electric drive motors, and there's the option to purchase extended warranties for, say, 10 years, 12 years, or even 15 years. So in the case of my organization, we're buying those extended warranties to hedge our risk, to mitigate our risk from an investment standpoint. And what I'm doing when I work with school districts and third-party fleet manufacturers, for example, in Connecticut, I would engage an entity for a period of 10 years, and I'm making a long bet with my capital that over the cost, the total cost of ownership amortized over that period of time is going to be a good investment for me, but I have to amortize it in such a way that I can depreciate the asset in a way that school districts typically cannot. So again, in order to hedge my risk, I have to leverage grant funding now for the incremental cost difference, and also hopefully develop a vehicle to grid program with the utility that'll give us some revenue that we use almost kind of as a pseudo pass-through to deliver our model predicated upon achieving budget neutrality for the district as a solution. Hopefully that answers your question.
And then some. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Yes.
Questions from others on the line right here? And let the minutes reflect, interjecting into the presentation here, let the minutes reflect, I see we're joined by Ronnie Rodman and Rick Bush, who joined after attendance was taken. I just want to make sure that we covered that. Welcome.
And I'll leave you with this as well before I conclude. So if you think about Connecticut, it really is a very heavy state that has third-party managers or third-party fleet managers, or what we refer to as 3PMs. So if you think about my model, it is a model in that it's malleable, in that we can work with both end-user school districts and also third-party fleet managers to deliver our budget neutral model. It is a little more complicated with third-party fleet managers. There's an added layer of complexity to work with them. We've engaged a few in the state of Connecticut, and as you can imagine, as a third-party fleet manager, they're much more for-profit and more profit-driven. So the level of interest really with electric at this point has been pretty marginal. But I'm an eternal optimist. I think that over time, this is going to gain a lot more traction and a lot more momentum in the market. And, as the cost actually comes down on this, our model from Highland will actually be more attractive. Instead of achieving budget neutrality, we may be even budget friendly for these districts, which is to say, someday we may be able to make the bet that electric may be even cheaper to cost and maintain for a diesel unit over time.
question for Mr. Daly.
Yeah, thanks, Sean Daly, Commissioner. Thanks for this. This is great. Just probably two, maybe three questions here. One is, in your presentation, the comment was, I saw in the presentation, the comment was made that a benefit of electric would be the elimination of fossil fuel dependency. I'm wondering how you can make that claim if really an electric bus is adding to the grid and the current grid is using fossil fuels to produce the energy.
Right. So that's partially true. So if you take a look at the way that electricity is generated, you have coal-fired power plants, you have nuclear power plants, you have wind farms, and you have solar. Those are the main, and you have hydro as well, especially in upstate New York and elsewhere. So, you know, as we move along over time, you're going to see more and more forms of non-carbon based energy generation, such as wind, solar, and even more of an expansion into hydro as we accelerate this market. And as I said, the Biden administration is earmarking funds for programs that are going to even drive this even further in a more accelerated fashion to make it even more efficient. So yes, you are partially right in that, you know, in some areas you do have coal that produces electricity for these buses, but actually I would actually counter against that to say that if you could potentially tap into a solar field or potentially wind energy, you can offset that carbon differential pretty substantively and actually have a resiliency option, which is to say you can have a semi-closed loop or closed loop microgrid with this technology, and then you are completely independent from any external generating capacity from an energy standpoint. And you're going to see this happen more and more out there, where you're going to see implementation of solar fields for resiliency plays, especially on the West Coast, where they have a very significant problem annually with fires. You probably saw in the news the glass fire that did a lot of damage up north in Northern California. Even on the East Coast and the Southeast with hurricanes, where you do have the potential for disturbance in the grid or energy. When you have a resiliency play like a school bus, which if you think about it, it's a mobile DER, distributed energy resource on wheels that can be deployed in instances of natural disasters to, say, convalescent homes or applications like refrigeration, or by default, you know, typically when there are these types of instances, you know, the natural sheltering mechanism that is usually tapped is schools. So, you know, there's several different ways you can look at it from a resiliency play option, and the way that the energy is used now and the way that it's going to be actually utilized and brought online in the future. If you think about it, the easiest way I think about it, I guess, Sean, is I would rather have an electric school bus with zero emissions from tailpipe that the kids ride on every day, that's being powered by electricity that's already being generated, versus having an additive, which would be a diesel or even propane or gas, which does have some level of emissions. Obviously, diesel and gas being two of the most problematic from the standpoint that if you're on board that bus, the diesel exhaust fumes or fumes are actually more concentrated on board a unit than off board a unit. So that's just my take on it.
I'm hearing really interesting points here, and don't let, I'm going to want you to continue, Commissioner Daly, but I also want to be kind to the agenda and the fact that we've got the town recycling coordinator as a second presenter. So how about we continue with Q&A until 7:50 and then try to cut it from there, if that works.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Sure. And if anyone else has other questions, please feel free. I don't want to hog the time. But yeah, and we can talk offline sometime, Mark, because I know wind energy is very difficult in the Northeast, where you can tend to get cold temperatures, which affect wind turbines. And then there's issues with how big you'd have to have a solar farm in order to generate enough power to run a bus fleet, especially for the state of Connecticut. So the other question I have is also one of the claims on electric buses that you made in your presentation was that this is a positive environment. And I get it. You're claiming that because of the lack of emission gases, CO2, and other types. But my understanding in reading too is that the battery packs for these buses that are, and I do agree, are being used by energy companies, right, as potential storage areas. Aren't those battery packs just as harmful for the environment?
No, they are not. They're comprised, so the primary chemistry or composition in the batteries currently is a lithium manganese cobalt gel, or we refer to gel as carbon. If you think about the batteries themselves, they actually, when the life expectancy is done with these battery units, which typically in a life cycle we'll see last anywhere based on the current modeling, probably 8 to 12 years, these aren't going to go into landfills. They're actually recycling these batteries today. And the way that they do it, if the battery holds an electric charge, they super freeze the battery to minus 225 degrees Fahrenheit. And then they shred the batteries and they separate out the rare earth elements like the lithium, the nickel, manganese, and even cobalt out of it. And they repackage and purpose it for resale. If the batteries don't hold a charge, they simply shred them and separate out the rare earth elements. And, they don't call them rare earth elements because they're, plentiful. So there is a market, a commoditized market right now for this product, especially the inherent elements that are in it. If you take a look at what recently happened during Tesla's Battery Day, which was about 2 months ago, they're actually talking about the advent of the next generation of this technology, which would be called solid state battery technology, less of a gel technology. And they're going to be actually using more silicon carbide actually in the batteries, for lack of a better term, which is really sand-based. So they're making leaps and bounds in this technology, which doesn't exist in a vacuum. The efficacy and improvements change in this field, in this market, probably every 60 to 90 days. There are some improvements being made. So if you think about the fact over time with this technology, you're going to have lighter battery packs that are going to give you greater range, that are going to contain less of those, rare earth elements that are going to be composed of mainly, elements that can be found in deserts. It's a pretty interesting and promising, future that this technology holds. And I think it really does hold a lot of great promise out there, probably more so than any technology that's come before it. I do know the next advent is probably going to be hydrogen fuel cells, but that's pretty far off. In order to produce hydrogen, you have to electrolyze water to separate it out to get the hydrogen from the molecules from the water. And you would have to have electrolyzer units that are very, very large and extraordinarily expensive to generate hydrogen. But that'll probably happen someday as well. But right now, the way electric is going, it's becoming an ascendant technology, and it's gaining a lot of momentum and velocity in the market presently.
Well, I hope you're right. I know we're at 7:50. Can I ask one last question, Matt, Mr. Chairman?
You got it.
Thank you. So, no, I appreciate that. I appreciate your comments, Mark. I would say that, we recycled in West Hartford, figuring that there would be recycling centers. And of course, most of our recycling ended up going to China. So I'm a bit skeptic when I hear that we're going to recycle batteries, but I appreciate your comments. The last question is, do you see any issues with the gas, propane, and CNG if we start to see a change in laws with fracking, as you mentioned, with President Biden?
Yeah, absolutely. That'll impact it substantially. As I said, I mean, if you think about where one of the largest deposits of shale is in your neck of the woods in Pennsylvania, the Marcellus shale deposit, which is fracked. Yeah, if that's prohibited, it's obviously going to countermand the production capacity for, CNG and propane, obviously. And I think, based on what Biden said, that's potentially could come to fruition.
I'll interject right there. I was trying not to, but just based on my knowledge, I think that the incoming president's position was he didn't want to do it on public lands. and that still allows for pretty much all the Marcellus shale play to be exploited right there. So private business in terms of resource extraction, that doesn't impede that. I could go for 2 hours on this stuff, Mark. This is an awesome presentation. Thank you, Commissioner Daley, for the further discussion prompts in the back and forth right there. This has been great, and I hope it was informative for the commission and for its audiences in the 3 a.m. Cable access viewership. So that was great. Thank you, Mark. Feel free to stay on board if you like. And it almost parlays directly into our second presentation of the night on agenda item number 3 for new business in the discussion of recycling at the tail end of that. We've got the town's new recycling coordinator as of last year, I believe, possibly this year. She can give us further background. Catherine Burns is with us from the town of West Hartford. So if we can have Ms. Burns commandeer the Zoom, WebEx, what have you, with the screen sharing function at the bottom, she may feel free to proceed.
I think I need Mark to unshare his.
Got it.
We do. You know what? I'm going to sign off really quick because I have to attend to some affairs here at home. So I'll just sign off really quick.
Thank
Mark,
you.
thank you for being with us tonight.
You bet. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. And by all means, you have my information. If you have any further questions or you need anything, please feel free to reach out. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mark.
There we go. So I hope that everybody can see that.
Yep.
Great. Thank you so much, Mark, for inviting me to speak today to the Environment Committee. And I'm really happy to be here. Wow, it's a hard presentation to follow. There was so much there to digest. And you did talk about recycling there in the end, which gives me the perfect segue. So yeah, I'm the town's new recycling coordinator. And it's really, we can't recycle our way out of this problem. So we really need to rethink about how we talk about trash and when I talk about the 6 R's. So I'm going to give you a faster overview of a presentation that I've developed to give around the community that people seem to really enjoy. The Q's and A's goes on for 40 minutes sometimes. I'm going to go through it a little bit faster because I think given the title that this is the Conservation and Environment Committee, I would imagine that I'm speaking to the choir for a lot of these things, but I'll talk about myself and all about what Connecticut is doing for materials management and the 6 R's of it. We can't just reduce and recycle our way out of this mess. I have some statistics from DEP for you that I think are really interesting. Talk about a little bit about food waste. Food waste is a whole nother topic of conversation that I'd love to come back and talk about. What are those pesky recycling triangles? What do those mean? And then the recycle CT, what's in and what's out. And then what's the conversation that is being had about what's going to go on in the future. Just a little bit about me. You might wonder what this slide is. It sort of encaptures me in a nutshell. I was actually born and raised in Japan. And here's the Great Wave filled with trash, which saddens me greatly. My American parents raised all 3 of my siblings and me there. And I think my early influences was my mother was either really ahead of her time or super old-fashioned because we conserved all the time. And so since that time, I've been an educator, do cross-cultural education, a lot of outreach. I'm also a master gardener recycler. I teach composting, so, but it all came out of my early years in Japan. So, you know, everyone generates trash. We all do all day long. Where does it go? Well, in Connecticut, it goes to we call it trash to energy facilities. They're really incinerators. Trash to energy is a little bit of greenwashing. A lot of argument about what is worse, landfill or trash to energy. And then we do have one landfill in Putnam, but that's a landfill for the ash that comes out of these incinerators. So the question everybody always has is, when is trash day? When can I put it on the curb and forget about it? We're lucky here in West Hartford that we do have curbside textile recycling here and yard waste, recycling and curbside trash pickup. A lot of communities in Connecticut don't have these. So here is a map of our municipal solid waste in numbers. The DEEP did a waste audit in 2015. And I won't go over all these numbers. Sorry, this is messed up here. This is electronics and then household hazardous waste in the blue. And you can see that the biggest component is food waste. And then we have paper here. And out of this analysis of our municipal solid waste, they came up with a comprehensive material management strategy. How can we manage our way to reduce waste 60% by 2024? That was the goal. So here's the comprehensive materials management plan. Their goals were to improve recycling programs. I would hope that that's one of the reasons why West Hartford was forward thinking and creating a position for someone to educate the public on ways to reduce what they produce and to align with Connecticut's climate action priorities and reduce waste, as you can see here on the right-hand side. And someone can wave their hand if I'm going too fast, but I put extra slides in here because I knew I was speaking to you all. So here's some numbers. You know, many of you probably know this in this crowd, but only 9% of all plastic produced is recycled. And I've heard that actually only 2% is that recycled into anything meaningful. So people think they put items like this in the blue bin. Isn't that great? It's recyclable. Why not use it? An average Connecticut family of 4 throws away about $1,600 in food waste a year, according to the National Resources Defense Council. That is the equivalent of purchasing 5 bags of food at the grocery store and leaving 2 bags in the parking lot before you even drive home. And I'll talk more about food waste in a bit. The average American throws away about 81 pounds of textiles a year. That's including the whole industry, but that's quite a shocking number. And an individual throws away about 4 pounds of waste a day. And the average household throws away around 8 to 12 pounds of food waste a week. I did a public outreach before Thanksgiving because the numbers around Thanksgiving waste are actually quite shocking. So what does it cost for West Hartford? So there's 3 main streams that our waste goes. So we have the municipal solid waste, which costs about $92 a ton in tipping fee. And then recycling, as Sean Daly rightly said, that China stopped taking, I think it was Sean or maybe it was Mark, that it was Sean, stopped taking our recycling. So an item that used to be a revenue source for our town is now currently costing $87 a ton. And across Connecticut, it's anywhere between $79 to $100 a ton. So that is part of our budget. Food scraps, we now have quantum biopower in Southington. We've had them present at the Clean Energy Commission. And a tipping fee there is about $57 a ton. So there is, you know, that's an interesting statistic as we look at ways to divert food waste, all for about a $3 million annual budget to our town. So it's no small thing, this waste that we all produce. So we have this DEEP goal of 60% diversion of waste from landfill by 2024. How do we get there? This is where I, as a teacher and educator, you know, try to make this, break it down into pieces. And to add to reduce, reuse, recycle that we all grew up with, it's time to think about a few more R's. We need to rethink, do we need things? Do we want to bring stuff into our house? Or when you have the choice of buying things like ketchup or mayonnaise or pickles, can we purchase it in glass instead of plastic to send the message home to the manufacturers of the product, the way that we want to be buying things? Because glass is, when it's clean, is 100% recyclable. Now, often it's made into road infrastructure projects and not into new glass material, but plastic is around forever. And each time it's recycled, it's degraded into a lower project. Can we refuse bringing things into our house? You know, now with so much carry-out orders because of COVID, one message I try to get out, and you have an option on DoorDash and Uber Eats and all that to refuse the cutlery or the little sachet packets that come with soy sauce and those sort of things. And it may seem like a small thing, but we can, refuse things. And obviously straws, which I'm sure we all are aware about. And then also reduce. We can't help bringing some of this stuff into our house, but certainly the choices that we make can reduce, what goes in our blue bins even. I hear all the time, my blue bin is full. Well, we need to reduce what we're even bringing into our house in the first place. So back to the 6 R's, reuse. All around here, these are the areas we can take things that we no longer need that are still in good shape. There are also yard sales. This right here is something called a repair cafe, and when COVID is over, I would love to arrange some of those that are community centers. And this is where you bring experts in who know how to sew and fix lamps and maybe repair computers and teach each other how we can make the products that we have last even longer. I love this idea, and it's really kicking off across the country. And then we have 1 R. We got one more before we even get to recycle, which is rot. Here is my son. He built me our first compost when we moved to Connecticut in 2004. Here he is putting in his first load in my beautiful compost bin from Japan, actually. And I'm a huge believer in composting. So this is normally when I do my teaching education piece where I have a quiz. I won't belabor it here, but I'll just do 2 items that people often don't know. For example, you have a medicine thing. Is this recyclable or not? I will ask people, well, it's plastic. It has a number on it. But because of its size, the recycling machinery, the grid goes like this, and it's 2-inch squares. So anything smaller than 2 inches in diameter actually falls through to the floor of the municipal recycling facility. It gets scooped up, and energy is taken to transport all that little stuff. You got little dental flosses or whatever fall through here, and it gets taken to trash anyway. So anything smaller than 2 inches in diameter is out. One more quiz item, because I'm trying to keep it shorter. These are receipts. Are they in or out? I don't know. Good. That's right. They are out. But like I said, that usually shocks a lot of people. So single stream recycling came around about 15 years ago. Isn't that great? You have this big blue bin. The more space I can put in, the more the merrier. Well, the problem is, that we have increased items put in there, but also a gross increase in the contamination of that material. People always say, well, what do those triangles mean? It has a triangle, why can't I throw it in? And you all probably know this, but those 1 through 7 triangles don't mean that it's recyclable. It's just an industry code to indicate the resin type, the heat at which it was produced, and how the mill that will take it to be recycled, if will process it or not. 1s and 2s in general are recyclable, but all the others you really need to check locally, like it's styrofoam and it's plastic bags and things like that. There's a move here on the right-hand side to this new type of recycling information, howtorecycle.info, and this tells you more how to do it. For example, if you're recycling a water bottle, it has to be with the cap on, not with it off, because this falls through that 2-inch square. So, or that plastic wrap does not belong in your blue bin. But we do know that we can take it to recycle other places. So here's a great infographic that I saw when I was on some workshop this summer, and I asked the North Carolina people who created it if I could take it and adapt it for West Hartford. And this is going to go up on our website soon and hopefully go out in a flyer. And it's on West Hartford Recycle's Facebook page. And it's a visual so that also people from other languages can see what goes in and what's out. And their main part in North Carolina, that it's not about numbers, it's about size and shape. So sort of 4 items and 4 categories and 9 items. So you've got plastic bottles, tubs, jugs, and jars. And none of all the small stuff is allowed. And then metal. not the coat hangers and pots. Metal can be recycled in West Hartford, but not in our blue bin. And same for glass and paper. No styrofoam, do not bag recyclables. I think I've got it all in one infographic. It hasn't gone 100% public yet, so if anyone wants to get back to me with an idea, I would really appreciate it. And this was another big thing, is plastic film recycling. A lot of people in town actually collected it. Before I started this job, the land trust and can't remember right now, somebody else got a drive to collect plastic film, and we were collecting at different drop-off sites in town, including the town hall, and then COVID hit. And people kept collecting and collecting, and they had so much of it. And now they've resumed pickup at places like Stop and Shop, but we don't have the town program because the town hall buildings aren't open. And you can go to plasticfilmrecycling.org and see where you can recycle, quite a wide variety. I've got all my props here for teaching. You've got the plastic film, you've got the Amazon Prime bag, all that can be recycled, just as we know, not in the blue bin. So that brings me to the wish cycling. A big one here is when wish cycling is when you wish something could be recycled, just because you want everything to be recycled. Or, this actually, styrofoam does have a triangle on it often, and it can't. So here you've got you've got styrofoam. In this middle one, my friends laugh at me because I take recycling pictures all the time, or people will send me pictures for good examples. This is a metal pot, and metal is recyclable, but just not in the blue bin. And these things contaminate our whole loads, and this is super recycling. That's a tool, yeah, it's plastic, but it doesn't belong. Here, I don't know, this is Julie Paynes from our hauler. Payne sent this picture to me. Here is a load of West Hartford's recycling, contaminated recycling. Anything more than 25, 26% contamination, it goes to trash. Can you see here? This is a green garden hose. That's actually called a tangler. Holiday lights are tanglers, plastic bags are tanglers, and I have a picture of what tanglers do to our recycling facility. I mean, I don't even know what to say about this. On the left here, that should be bulky waste. This one someone sent me. This is super aspirational wish cycling to have a golf bag in here. On top of beautifully folded cardboard, I might add. They did a great job with that. So yeah, that does not belong there. So Recycle CT has a Recycle Right campaign. They're really trying to get the message out that you cannot put recyclables in plastic bags. This is a picture of a MRF, a municipal recycling facility. 2 people in there with box cutters. I'm told that facilities are shut down for 3 hours a day as they cut through all these tanglers. This here on the left, when we had that windstorm a couple weeks ago, this tipped over near my neighborhood. Here's Christmas lights. They actually are recyclable. Green Monster will take them, and so will Take Two, but they don't belong in the blue bin. Neither do diapers and bowling balls, but those are all often found as well. I shouldn't laugh. I show these pictures because without pictures, I mean, this really brings it home. This is actually from a Virginia municipal recycling facility. I was hoping to tour our own and get my own personal pictures, which I will do when COVID is over. But this is, I don't know what this is. This is a tripod here, and then all this plastic film here. So there are actual people here pulling off all the stuff that goes in there because of single stream. So the messaging is really key. So I'll tell the people when I present, the real thing is when in doubt, throw it out. It's a lot better to not contaminate the loads now that it's better not to contaminate. And we have West Hartford Recycles app, and I'm actually in charge of it. And so if there's ever a material that's not on there, please let me know so you can find it wherever you get your apps. And we also actually have it on the town website. You can put your material in here, and I've tried to give a lot of suggestions of what to do with it before you even recycle it, if there's a place to donate. So recycling is always changing, and it's, I argue that it's up to us to keep informed. We're purchasing these things. We need to learn what's in and what's out. Black plastic used to be allowed, and people were quite upset when it was taken out. It's taken out for a few reasons. It has very little value for the mill on the long run. Make it into a new product. And black plastic's also very hard, and there's optical sorters for them to pull it out. Pizza boxes used to not be allowed, and now they are. The technology is improved. It can handle a little bit of grease. Obviously, you want to take all the chunky food out, but often there's a sheet underneath. But actually, the industry needs this material. With COVID, they are in dire need of all the cardboard that used to come from commercial sources. Now that the way we purchase has changed and the commercial industry has slowed down, restaurants and shops, they're counting on recycling the material for recycling. Here's another little quiz. These I'm asked a lot. Are they recyclable or not? They are, but not, they are, but not in our blue bin. Let's see. They can be done through a TerraCycle program, so sometimes breweries will recycle them, but not in the blue bin. And then you have a single, this is called a spiral round container, and it has too many different materials in it, and so that's not allowed either. I've done it again. And then here is a typical Amazon packaging, and as we know now, this plastic film can be recycled, but not the styrofoam. And for all you gardeners out there, all plastic cannot be recycled. Lowe's has in the past had a program for gardening black plastic, and I've always taken it there. The last time I went, it wasn't up and running again, so that's something I need to find out more about. Just quickly on food waste. The National Resources Defense Council says that if food waste were a country, it would be the third largest emitter of greenhouse gases. That is quite the thing. So 40% of all food produced is wasted from the farm, the energy that's used, the water that's used to produce it, the energy that's used to transport it, and then it's wasted in the supermarket and then in the homes and restaurants. So I give these tips here, and I'm sorry if I'm going too fast, but to plan shopping and shop your pantry. And I do this, I'm sharing this with you so that you all know that what I'm sharing with the West Hartford community. And people have really been surprised by this. I'm almost at the end here. So we had our 4th year of having a pumpkin drop-off, and to save this from going to trash. And 1.2 tons were brought down. I really appreciate all the people who made use of it. That's quite a lot that did not go to trash. So I will go through this really quickly. The Yard Waste and Recycling Center, a lot of people don't know that they can bring what does not fit in their blue bin to the Yard Waste and Recycling Center. These are all the items you can bring. This is the metal. So that metal pot could have been recycled. It just needed to be brought to a different place. Mattresses, we did a huge thing on Channel 3 here. Mattresses are 80% recyclable, and we're one of 3 states in the country that are part of a mattress product stewardship initiative. In other words, we participate in the offering. We all Connecticut municipalities offer drop-off for mattresses to be recycled. The wood is made into wood chip, and the cloth is made into the batting for carpeting. And I didn't know that much about mattresses until about 8 months ago.
I'm going to intervene for just a second there, Catherine. Yeah. I made the mistake when I needed to dispose of a mattress at the Yard Waste and Recycling Center of taking a Sawzall to it and dicing it because I thought it'd be easier for everybody, for me to transport and for them to take it. Its entire mattresses. It's got to be whole. So I'll just add that to the conversation. Please
very continue. Good to know. I did not know that. So thanks, Matt. And I think last year in fiscal year 2020, West Hartford collected 2,000 mattresses. So that's a lot that we're not paying tipping fees, and that's not filling up landfills in other states or being burned here in our state. here's another place for all clothing and shoe donations that what can't be donated is actually recycled. And then, of course, the electronics. You can always take it there. You don't have to wait for one of our drives. So I'm almost at the end. So in August, DEEP started a Connecticut Coalition for Sustainable Materials Management with 4 working groups to say, okay, this is all fine and dandy. How do we get there? And so the 4 working groups are in increased recycling, unit-based pricing, which is a pay-to-throw trash program, food scraps and organics working group, to get that 23% out of the municipal solid waste, and then EPR, which is extended producer responsibility. So these 4 working groups have been working really hard, meeting every week and coming up with real, marketable, everybody can use it, uniformed ways of moving forward, of asking our local governments for permitting, speeding up permitting for if it's organics or food scraps, really talking about how unit-based pricing is a benefit and can reduce trash by 40%. And then extended producer responsibility is a global conversation of making the manufacturers of all these endless products and packaging. We wanted a extended producer responsibility for packaging, making them responsible for the true cost of their product and the end life of it, and not us as municipalities and taxpayers to bear the burden of all this trash. Sometimes we can't make those choices. I heard this summer that over 3,000 new types of packaging are created every year. How is a recycler to stay on top of that? So really quickly looking forward, bag fees are a conversation, and certainly one passed in West Hartford. Increasingly, there are styrofoam bans. The bottle bill, there's a huge push for 10 cents, to increase it to 10 cents from 5 cents. Glass separation is a conversation that's being had. People aren't going to be happy, but if you separate out glass from single stream, 1, it has value, 2, it's guaranteed to be recycled, and 3, it decreases the weight of what's going to our our recycling facilities. Extended producer responsibility, I talked about in the previous slide. The pay-to-throw, or unit-based pricing, where trash is treated like a utility. If you are paying for your electricity, you don't leave your air conditioning running all day or your lights on. If you pay for what you throw away, you think about how you consume. And it's proven to increase recycling, and it goes really well hand in hand when there's an organics separation to food scrap diversion program too. Break Free from Plastic has a bill before Congress to ban the use of all single-use plastics. I've been following that. I have some links at the end that I can share with people if they want, but the Break Free from Plastic movement is huge. And of course, around all of this is a conversation about environmental justice. Where are our trash to energy facilities located, and the harm it creates to those communities with the gases that come off of the burning of our waste. So when I present, I leave everybody with a challenge. I love to do this. What single-use plastic or single-use anything can you pledge to give up in 2021? I heard that if everyone used a single-use mask every day around the world, we'd end up with 3 trillion masks. So I'm saving those for the healthcare workers. But here, when I was a kid, we didn't pump our soap. We just had a bar of soap and it went away. Or, here's my daughter got me into this. This is a glass dental floss, so we don't create all that. And this is me going through an airport with my water bottle after you go through security. And then, of course, I'm sure we all are aware of the hot and cold Starbucks beverages. So I've started with Japan. I'll just end with Japan. Chopsticks are called hashi. You can imagine in Asia that zillions are used. And I know they're wood, but they just create tremendous waste. And so when you take your own hashi somewhere, it's called a mai hashi. And the mai hashi movement is the big deal in Japan right now. I've got a pair of my own that I take even when I'm not eating Asian food. So here's my list of resources. I've started social media right in the beginning of COVID. I used the time to do that. So we have a West Hartford Recycled's Facebook page, a Twitter, Instagram, and actually even a YouTube channel. And there's Buy Nothing West Hartford is a great place to, like a marketplace locally, to get rid of things. Here's the Break Free from Plastic organization, which is terrific. I would follow them. And Food Waste Starts With Me. There's this I can share. I'm happy to share this slide of organizations that I find quite useful. So I leave you all, you know, it all seems so overwhelming. What difference does it make if I stop using a plastic water bottle? But as the Dalai Lama says, if you think you're too small to make a difference, try sleeping with a mosquito. So this is how I can be reached, and I'd love to have this conversation. I love to talk trash. We often joke that you got the energy Catherine and the trash Catherine in town.
That was fantastic. Absolutely fantastic, Catherine. I can't say how much I appreciated that education. I think that what you said is so valuable. It really needs to be disseminated to all the residents. I have arguments all the time with people about what they should and shouldn't throw into those blue bins. And I think I know, and I really didn't even know. I mean, you should almost make a sticker and hand one out, and we should just stick them right onto the blue bins. Only put this, I mean, they're pretty limited. I think what should go into those blue bins. It's not a second trash can. It really isn't.
It really isn't. And, there was so much, thank you very much, by the way. Thanks. I try to really think, what is the message we need to get across to residents? What is it that we're not understanding? What is it that I didn't know? I've learned a lot too. And people get into habits and they just think, I need to fill that blue bin. And when COVID first started, oh my gosh, we got so many complaints. If I can stay at home and work all day and raise my kids, then you all can do your job and pick up recycling twice a week. And I would write these letters, or, we'd go out and check it out. And I'd say, if you take out the styrofoam and you break down your boxes, and I understand it's complicated, it's tough right now. We are all at home and we're generating trash differently. We're not generating it at work and the gym and all places of worship. It's all coming out of the home. But there are places to take it. We have a great town. We have a great yard waste and recycling center for the excess and in the moments of the holidays when we have too much.
I think the brown bins, that was a great addition for the town of West Hartford, to put the yard waste in instead of people trying to throw that into the green bins as well. That was a really big and important addition to the town.
And I see every day the report from Paynes of the contamination. So the drivers are looking, and what I'm working on is a tagging system, but you need to have the enforcement. That's a tricky thing. And one big contaminant is plastic bags, styrofoam, and yard waste in the trash and recycling. And that's actually against the law.
How do they, oh, sorry, I don't mean to just jump in here. I'm not raising my hand at all, but how do the drivers, they dump it out of the truck and they can actually see it? How do they know where, or is it once it gets back to the facility?
That is where we actually get an address and we know what they're putting in it if they can visibly see it, if the lid is open. But we are allowed as town, as city workers, once it's at the curb, I can lift it up and look. And my running group on my running morning when it's recycling day, there's, don't get near Catherine. I'll bring my phone with me and take pictures, because I think it helps when you have visuals. It's never to shame anybody. I always make sure you can't tell what house it is. I just focus in on the item because it's about education. It's not about anything more than that.
For starters, Mr. Bush, I actually found it refreshing that you were bypassing the whole ricochet all questions off the chair right there. I enjoyed the conversation. And I would push back on the idea that we you're talking to a group here that knows everything about this. I learned a heck of a lot during this presentation. So
Wow.
that was great. I
Thank
think
you so much.
others in
Maybe
the
I
commission
went
might
too
too.
fast because I kind of skimmed over some stuff because I also realize it's a long presentation and it's late. So.
Well, I want to get to others' questions, but just a couple things. Number one, I'm one of the people that have now downloaded the West Harvard Recycles app. I'm looking forward to checking that out. Number two, in the future, we should probably have you back to zero in on a subject matter of relevance, because there's probably so many under the Conservation Environment Commission that a person in your position could identify. And what I would take for you, either to respond now or as homework at your leisure, is a person in your position, what should they be asking people in our positions of this commission to be doing for assistance in terms of serving your mission? So that's one prompt that I would take as a takeaway for you. I saw two hands up. Let's go with Mr. Newton first and then Mr. Daly. All right.
Great.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's Commissioner Ted Newton. And so again, Catherine, thank you very much. Great presentation. I learned a ton, like everybody else, I think, on the commission did. I must say I'm a pretty avid recycler myself, and figuring that I maybe knew 60 to 70% of what you just said leads me to believe that those people who are probably the vast majority of West Hartford residents who are not as committed to recycling probably know less. And so I think we have, the town has a real challenge to get the information out in a way that makes sense. The app is good, but I just learned that the plastic bottles that are less than 2 inches are not acceptable. I went into my app just to check that and found that information isn't in the app, or at least not under plastic bottles, not under medicine bottles, not under anything that you would think that you would normally look up. So I feel like there's gotta be.
Okay, I'm gonna make a note of that.
Okay. Yeah, and I think I've looked that up before. So, and I always ask my wife, because she's so involved with the town in other respects, do you think this is recyclable or not? And we'll talk about it, we'll look it up, and it's not that clear. So the other thing that really kind of shocked me today was that the cost for recycling and the cost for trash are almost the same right now.
Yeah.
And that to me changes the mental calculations quite a bit, because if I have 2 pumpkins, I'm not sure I'm going to drive them over to Brixton Street and waste the gas and pollute the air and spend time when I can just toss them in the trash. And quite honestly, it's not really, I mean, I probably should, what do you call it?
Compost.
Toss them in the, compost them in the garden, right. But that was a bad example, I suppose. But what I'm saying is that when people make a decision whether to recycle or to throw it in the trash, they might think that the more they put in the recycle bins, the better the town is going to be from a revenue standpoint. That's not the case anymore. And in fact, it may even be worse because it takes people time to kind of unsort things that shouldn't be in there. So I know these are two very unfocused statements, but I do think we need to do more around education, but also let people know that putting stuff in the trash isn't as bad as they may have been led to believe 5 or 10 years ago when we had a much greater focus on recycling.
That's a really good point. So when I say, when I message it, I should connect it with putting it in trash and isn't as bad as you think. I didn't. Yeah, those two together are a great combination. Because I often say, when in doubt, don't put it in there, because contamination ruins whole loads. But if you say it's not so bad to throw it out, that's a good thing to do in unison. So thanks for that. That's a great idea.
Thank you.
Mr. Dale.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very good presentation. I really appreciated the information that was shared. I'm going to, of course, take a little bit of a different view on this than others who have spoken. I really will tell you, from being in an industry where I'm in the retirement industry and saving for retirement, and I can tell you, while it may not seem that there's some synergies here, there are. And one of the things that I'm really concerned about your presentation is that we're not making it easier for our residents. We're making it more complex. I mean, when I went through most of your presentation, you had to be a Philadelphia attorney to figure out what it is I can throw away, what it is, and we continue to the point of residential fatigue. We continue to push this on residents who have to be the ones to act on this, when in many cases, these are government oversights or things that are being done or not being done by the government that could be done better. And I'd really like to see us take more of a proactive approach that way. For example, you mentioned the waste of food, which I totally agree with you, right? And one of the biggest, what's the word I'm looking for? One of the biggest actors on this are restaurants. But restaurants, there would be, I can't tell you how many times we've seen this and heard these anecdotes of restaurants and bakeries that throw day-old bread, right, and food that could easily be shared with homeless shelters to feed our homeless that are in our
Sean, can I
town.
just pop in there? So these conversations are being had. You'll be really happy to know that there are rules that they're getting out there. There's a good John Erickson Good Samaritan Act of 1978 or something. If you can guarantee that you have kept the food at the right temperature and donate it in good faith, you can donate it to all these facilities. And there's food harvesting. There's an app where people can see which restaurants and grocery stores are donating and then pairing it with who needs it, and volunteers will pick it up from one place. I think Bernie Patellier does this and take it to another place. So that great point, that conversation's being had certainly about food waste.
And I've heard that.
As
Yeah,
far
I've
as
absolutely
making-
heard that. We need to do more of that. But other things that we need to do too is, so you mentioned about the grocery bags. I'm probably one of the older members on this commission. I can remember, right, why we switched from paper bags to plastic bags at Stop and Shop. And it was because of recycling. That paper bags were more harmful to the environment, and we needed to go to plastic bags because Stop and Shop and other grocery stores, and you kind of mentioned this in your presentation, were going to set up specific recycling centers to recycle those cheap plastic bags. The problem is that it was never followed through. It was never done. And so now what do we have? I got to pay 10 cents for those stupid bags. We need to think more about, less about getting, first of all, and I, I'm gonna tease Rick about this, right? But when I first redid my kitchen, when I bought my home in West Hartford 20 years ago, my first 3 years I redid my kitchen. I tore up everything, did the work myself, and you know what I got to do? Even with the decent taxes that I paid, I got to put it out on the curb and the town took it away, right? Now, 2 years ago, I redid my kitchen. There was no way I could do that. I did hire a professional, right? And he took care of it because I didn't want to worry about it. Well, my point is that we make it so complex that I've got to take this to one facility. I've got to take this to another facility. People are just not going to do it, and we're not going to accomplish the goals. I think what's more important is that we need to focus on the end state. We need to focus on actually changing our recycling centers. The problem is not that we're producing more trash. And in fact, what I was going to tease Rick about is, while Rick may do a kitchen and may try and reuse as much as he possibly can, at the end of the day, we're a consumer-driven market. We want people to throw away their stuff and buy new stuff, right? Because I don't want this economy to go into a recession. I don't want people.
So I would step right in there, and I would argue differently that way of life is not sustainable. And if you see a Break Free from Plastic movie, we cannot continue to live this way. The earth cannot sustain it. So if you can argue from the paper bag to the plastic, that's fine. But really, the issue is to not use either of those and go back to the way our grandmothers did it, which was take your own bag, take a basket. I mean, in Japan, when my mom was first there, they took a wooden box and got the tofu that way. It's all convenience. We just want convenience, and it's not a sustainable way of life.
We could sustain it that way if we originally created recyclable facilities that could do what it was originally intended to do. The problem is we're trying to come up with a cure instead of solve for the disease. And really, in this situation, the disease is we don't have, again, you had mentioned, right? When we recycled, we originally thought our recycling was going to a recycling center. It turned out it wasn't. We would have never recycled as much as we did if we knew it was just simply going to a landfill in China. we were lied to as a community and as a nation. What we need to do
weren't lied
now
to.
is focus our attention on recycling.
It was going to recycling facilities in China. Often it was so contaminated that it wasn't recyclable, so China started to reject it. That's one of the reasons for the China sword or the green wall policy. One of the plus things about China rejecting our recycling is that it's proven that recycling is an industry. So we can bring jobs to Connecticut if we have depackaging plants for the food that's going to waste. If we have, the quantum biopower, and the name is escaping, Aposogen that's making bricks out of glass. So there are industries that are growing around it because China's rejected it. There's paper mills in upstate New York that are now being changed into paper recycling facilities. So we're in the middle of a change where we're going to have it, but I argue and I truly believe that we can't recycle. I am the recycling coordinator, and I probably should say this, we can't recycle our way out of this problem. We really need to rethink consumption. And it doesn't mean there are jobs to be had in it, just like there are in green and in energy and all that. And to change to do a product that is still convenient, like biodegradable containers, are a whole nother topic of conversation, and it's late and I won't get into them. That's just another way to have convenience. It's, for behaviors that people don't want to go back to, ways of life that are slightly more inconvenient.
Well, I appreciate your time. And obviously we kind of sit on a little bit of a different spectrum as to where we stand. The one thing that I know to be a truism is that if you make things more complex, people just won't do it. They won't do it.
Well, yeah, Rick, you're on mute.
Hey, all right. So, I don't want to continue this line of conversation, except for I want to say that I think some of the ideas are a little too broad. We just got to stick to what we're capable of doing. And I think, Catherine, you're kind of hitting the point with doing the little things for each person. So I think the question that I wanted to ask, or at least not even question, but you had said EPR. You would use the acronym EPR. Can you tell me what that means again?
Yeah, so that's the big buzzword, and it's global. It's extended producer responsibility.
Right. So I think that's really, to me, that was the key, the largest global thing that you said tonight. And there's no doubt in my mind that's a rabbit hole that we need to go down, because I think ultimately that's where we've gotten ourselves into trouble as a globe, where these large producers of all these different things, or whether they're oil, right, or the big oil, or big pharma, or big antibiotics, all these things have you moved on my screen over here now. They're creating the problem, and then they're expecting the end user to solve it. And I really think that's where I'd like to see some focus being made into those types of things. And one of the other things, and I don't know if I'm sure this is a silly question, because I'm sure people have thought of it already, but why isn't there a more universal type of plastic? Right? I mean, isn't plastic? I mean, why do we need 7 different types of plastic or 15 different types of plastic? Can't we just have one that's more recyclable or something like that?
That's a great question that I cannot answer, and don't we all wish that? I mean, look at the products that are around in just the last 15 years for children's food packaging for new babies that didn't exist before. It's purely convenience, and so each type, things aren't recyclable because there's too many types of plastic in one item. So it's really better off to go to trash, to keep it simple, to Sean's point, keep it simple and throw it away, and then it will get incinerated. But I agree with you, Rick. And that's where the Nestle's and the Dow Chemicals and the big producers of trash are, being held to account for just coming up with more and more new products that, as we don't allow them in Europe and North America, they are selling shamelessly to the developing world. Like you wouldn't be allowed to be selling one pack use of shampoo or oil, but people can't afford to buy a whole thing of oil, so they'll go and buy these things called sachets, and that is what's contaminating, Manila Bay. It's not because they're terrible polluters. It's because, they're forced to buy products, or they're offered products in a way that are never be allowed here in North America. So they're building them faster than, you can shake a stick at. But that's,
I think we might need to get the bus guy back to answer some of the questions on plastics, perhaps, just the way that
Yeah.
one was going.
yeah.
So
I'm sure not a scientist.
we've got in the chat log, Jess had connectivity issues. She was wondering a little bit about the town's role with CCSMM. I'm not even going to attempt to recall the acronym there, but we also have town manager Matt Hart, who's on board with us tonight to hear a lot of these great presentations. I just wanted to ping him to see if he wanted to say any words or make any points on that as well.
No, thank you, Matt. I also want to thank Catherine for an excellent presentation. One of the reasons why I'm listening in tonight is she and John Phillips, at some point in the not too distant future, will be having a similar conversation with our town council. And I would just encourage you all to follow that process, because West Hartford, like municipalities around the state, needs to wrestle with this issue and decide what we're going to do in the future. As you may know, waste management costs, as Catherine talked about early on, in addition to the environmental issues, they've been a significant cost driver for the town in recent years. And tipping fees, the rate of increase far exceeds the rate of inflation. So would ask you to track what's happening with our council discussion. We may ask you to weigh in on the various policy options that we present to them. But thank you again for the opportunity to attend tonight, and appreciate the good work you do all year round.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
Any others on this agenda item?
Chairman, it's Ted Newton, Commissioner again. Just hearing one thing that Sean mentioned a few minutes ago just resonated with me, which is he didn't come out and say it, but specifically, but I think what he was saying that it's very complicated right now for the average resident to be able to comply in a way that makes sense from a revenue standpoint for the town. And to the extent that we can simplify the process, even if it means that we aren't perfect, but we are good, and we can be good sustainably going forward, perhaps that is a strategy that we want to think about. So I think simplifying the process, simplifying the information that is out there, making the information that is out there more available to your average resident, and perhaps applying a little stick, which Matt, maybe you're alluding to pay as you throw again, which I think is great in concept, because it really does bring down to the individual resident. As you mentioned, Catherine, you don't expect to pay for your air conditioner and open up all the windows and just run it on high, because nobody would do that, right? So why would you not think about thoughtfully about what types of things you would put in your trash? You'd try to, if you're incented to make good decisions, you're going to inform yourself. So I think it's a little combination of simplifying the process, educating our residents, and providing a financial incentive for them to do a little bit better job educating themselves. I think all that really can play into increasing our ability as a town to do a better job recycling. And I don't know if this is a question for either you, Catherine, or Matt, but to the extent that regionalization makes sense, I know that that's a much larger conversation within the state of Connecticut right now, but this issue seems to scream regional approach as opposed to town by town approach. And I don't know if we're looking into that as well.
Well, go ahead, Matt.
Oh, you can, Catherine. You can talk about the CCM and DEEP initiatives.
Yeah, so the DEEP initiative to do this CCSMM, the Connecticut Coalition for Sustainable Materials Management, is an effort to do just that, and to say, how do we coalesce 169 different towns, and I think 78 towns have signed on so far and are part of these working groups. And it is very gratifying to be on a working group where you don't feel like you're reinventing the wheel, but we'll have a system that works, across the region and work together. Say if you can do a food scrap diversion program, you're not in it alone. You're working with others around you. So does that's what CCSM. And that also answers the question in the chat about what that stood for. And you can go on the DEEP website and read all about CCSMM. Their meetings are there. Their excellent presentations are there. You can watch them retroactively. It's been terrific. They've got great speakers from around the United States with examples of what's worked in other places. One great one was a woman from San Antonio presented on deconstruction. So rather than demolition, having some sort of permitting for deconstructing buildings. It takes longer, it's more expensive, but then it's not going to landfill and costing money. And you can also reuse a lot of the products, especially if it's in a house of any value. So deconstruction is another buzzword along with EPR, as Rick mentioned. Go ahead, Matt.
Which Matt?
Oh, sorry, I thought Matt Hurd had something to say.
He'll take precedence if he does.
Thank you, Catherine. That was a good description. And CCM, which stands for the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities, also very involved with the DEEP effort. And, we have conversations at our level as well. But to respond to the question, I think the best solution will be a regional one, perhaps one that's even statewide.
Thank you.
We have Commissioner Daly.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Yes, Commissioner Daly. Just a quick question for Mr. Chairman for both Matt and Catherine. Has there been any thought given to the future of moving to a more competitive environment for hauling trash facilities? I've heard of many other areas of the country that have actually moved to, instead of one organization, one organization that is contracted by the town contracts with several organizations and allows the residents choice as to who collects their trash and recyclables, and therefore it creates a much more competitive environment.
So competitive so that the cost of throwing away is less for residents, or because a lot of the municipalities across the Connecticut do have a competitive bid system. We don't here in West Hartford. I don't know the history long enough about when we started with the contracting that we did. So I know when you get into the Housatonic Valley, people have a lot of different choices with how they want to have their services, or they have a dump you can take your material to if you really want to save money.
Yeah,
So
let me add to
up
Catherine's point. Sean, I think that is one of the options that we have considered in the past and will consider again, whether it's through a franchise or some other type of arrangement. But what we do now is we bid out various aspects of the operation, as you know, such as the hauling, which is performed by Paynes. We bring our materials to Covanta, our MSW. That's through something of a competitive bidding process as well, but the town is still very much in control. So, to your question, I think that's an option we will explore. One concern with that is the town's ability to make sure that the providers are doing the right thing and handling the waste in a responsible manner. But if they're properly permitted, that expectation is set and there's a way to monitor them.
Right. Well, and there's two ways you can go, right? I think Catherine mentioned one, right? Which is, first of all, go to competitive bid, and then through competitive bid, it handles the entire town. But the other way is to view it almost as if you would your television or cable service, right? You can have DirecTV, or you can have Cox Cable, or you can have Frontier, or you can have this. And what you do is the town says, okay, we've selected from these 5 or 6 different facilities. And on the surface, it seems like it's less efficient, right, than to have one organization do it. But from some of the reading that I've done, it actually becomes more efficient because now you have more competition competing for residential homes.
I'd be curious as to how that actually works logistically in terms of the competition sorting out who does what. But I'm sure that the folks who are with us tonight are receptive to all good ideas that come their way and for their own continued exploration. I'll leave that open for any response if you do want to respond before I close out the agenda item. Catherine or Matt?
Well, again, I think that's an option that we will study further. The way it operates, according to my understanding, it's a certified list of contractors that residents can use.
It leads to some, I'll add to what Matt said, is that it adds to congestion and confusion on the streets when you have trash carts going through every single day of the week for different dates for different places. That's one of the disadvantages I've heard about that.
So costs and benefits to everything is the answer to that, is what it sounds like. Very cool.
Yeah, the emissions come to mind as a big problem for me.
What, sorry, I didn't hear that.
Can you repeat?
Like vehicle emissions. If you have like one set of garbage trucks servicing your street versus 4 or 5 sets of garbage trucks servicing your street.
Yeah.
We'll get a all fuels garbage truck manufacturer to present on electric garbage truck.
There you go. That's a good one.
Routine routes, return to base operations, they're just pricey too. So the third item on the agenda, and thank you, Ms. Burns, you're welcome to stick with us for the remainder if you like, and we'll certainly be getting you back, I feel like.
I probably will bow out, but I really appreciate the opportunity to share with all of you. Thank you for great questions and conversation.
Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you very much.
Good. Yep.
Bye-bye.
Absolutely. So the funny thing about the first two items of new business is they both had this crossover with energy from the school bus presentation with regards to how electric buses can work with the power grid and that entire system, even as part of the revenue model. And then from this, going into trash to energy plants or anaerobic digesters, food waste to energy plants as a part of the food waste recycling solution in Connecticut. We had on the agenda for our next item discussion of the Clean Energy Commission's draft update to their 2009 report to Town Council to create a clean energy plan, and as a non-routine matter, updating that plan for the next decade to essentially make it evergreen in the near term. What I've been thinking about over this last hour as it's starting to get late is that these presentation materials were not appended to anything nor publicly viewable. I'm thinking of this in the online context that we're living in right now, and I'm not sure if we shouldn't seek a presentation at a future meeting for maybe December on this clean energy plan so that we can go back and forth with some questions on this. At least one member and I had a colloquy back and forth with some thoughts on it. And I'm not sure if this is a context-free sort of space to be discussing this right out of the blue without having seen that presented to us in the same form as we just saw over the past couple hours, which granted, I kind of ballparked it in the realm of 1 hour rather than 2 for those first 2 presentations. So as we get into a third hour right here, I might be thinking of an alternative way to be bringing this up before us, unless folks had, I could share a quick 3 minutes worth of thoughts as I read it here and essentially be done with the issue. Or we can dissect it for further analysis and what we would want to be engaged with when it comes to that draft clean energy plan from a peer commission. I want to open it up to thoughts from the members right here in real time as to if there's a preferred approach on that, because I'm chairing here, but I'm kind of open to flexibility as we're approaching the 9 o'clock hour. Mr. Daly first.
Commissioner Daly, thanks for sharing. I think we should maybe table this. Obviously you and I have communicated a little bit. One of the things I'd like to do, I wouldn't mind a more formal presentation, especially if it addresses kind of the questions I had for you, which is one of the things that I had some trouble with looking at the strategy is I still don't understand what they're trying to solve for. So I get what they're trying to do and what the plan is, and I thought that was well written out, but I don't understand. It doesn't look like they've necessarily defined the issue, or they've simply assumed facts not in evidence. And so I would love to have them back at another time where maybe we could provide that feedback so they'd be prepared to answer that question when they provided the presentation.
Absolutely. And we could certainly feel free to do so informally, with them. They had a contact email that was listed on it. So in the meantime, if we so choose, we can also provide feedback to them as we were invited to do. Does that work? I'm looking out for all of you here.
Matt,
Jess, please.
I hope that you can hear me. I seem to have a moment of clarity here. But when were they looking for feedback by?
That was not articulated. This is a draft that's in motion. I think they put it out to multiple bodies around the town, the Bicycle Advisory Commission, possibly council or some members perhaps, possibly mayor's office or some elements of it perhaps. I don't recall exactly. And that feedback, you're asking me from an interesting position because as a previous frequent volunteer of the Clean Energy Commission, especially back in 2013 to 2016 range of time, I was involved in some of the first iterations of trying to redraft that plan. And so it's 5 years later and we have a very nice product in front of us to start looking at. But the timescales, that kind of warps my potential answer right there. I don't know if it's next month or next year is the same answer as next month, but yeah, you get where I'm going. Great question though. So tabled for a December meeting, and we'll extend an invitation to see if folks would be interested in that, and we could feel free to provide and we'll give it some, better publicity as a result from a peer commission and a good work from them. So moving on to final agenda items, open discussion, which can go forever. So let's do it. Strategy and issue identification. Let's see. Commissioner Daly, did you want to lead off on that one?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a little bit difficult, right, as we move into the third hour. So I thought maybe, Mr. Chairman, that it might be best for me maybe to describe what we would want to do, and then maybe table this for table the more interactive discussion for a future meeting.
Sure, absolutely. Okay. But you wanted to tee it up?
So, yeah, absolutely. So one of the things when I first joined the commission here, one of the, I of course, as has been my modus operandi, it seems like since I've been on the commission, I do tend to ask a lot of questions, so I apologize in advance. But I like to become as knowledgeable as possible on certain subjects. And one of the things that I asked the chairman was I asked, kind of what's our purpose as an organization? I've read on the town website, I've read, kind of the establishment purpose, I've read, of what we're supposed to do. But I really, there were some things that have come up during the year where I've said, well, are we supposed to review this first before it goes to planning and zoning? Are we supposed to do something before it goes, are we supposed to be a review committee? Kind of where does our organization fit? And Mr. Chairman, you agreed that, we really haven't defined that, nor have we defined as a commission what it is that we want to, it's like the Conservation Energy Commission is creating the energy plan. There are other commissions that are creating a plan of their own. And it struck me that we don't seem to have a plan of our own. So one of the things that I would like to propose that we do is, we were going to get into it tonight, but I just feel it being 9 o'clock, it doesn't make sense. But maybe in a future meeting and other meetings that we start to have real beneficial conversations about what it is that we want to do as a commission, how we want to be viewed by the public, and whether or not it makes sense to create a strategy of our own that we can communicate so that we're, so that commissions like the planning and zoning or other parts of the organization know what certain things should flow through us and what other items shouldn't. And then, for example, and I think tonight is a perfect example, and I think somebody had mentioned this, right, is when Catherine did a great presentation on this, it's kind of, well, what's the ask of us? And I didn't necessarily hear that she really knew what the ask is of us. And in my opinion, it should be Catherine should come in, be able to do this presentation and say, Commission, here's what I need you to do because I know the role within the town. And that's what I'd like to see more from this commission. And I'll leave that and open it up to discussion.
Cool. Thank you, Mr. Daly. And just initial thoughts reacting to that. I suspect, obviously, you and all the other commission members have followed this saga as I've sought to throw elbows on behalf of the commission and expand our potential role in terms of what it is we do beyond wetlands applications pre-approvals for TPZ. And going into our ordinance or our spot in the town code defining the Conservation Environment Commission, it is pretty broad and, you know, appropriately broad in the sense that it allows for flexibility for citizens to come and go and join in and potentially engage on these issues. And what we're currently in the midst of, as you know, any one on the outside who's viewing this might be able to discern, is that we're in the midst of issues identification in terms of what is interesting and what is applicable and what should be delved into. And so I guess one prompt for future thought that makes me think of is, where does strategy fall with regard to that? Does it fall in advance of issues identification, or does it come afterward? Is it primarily a matter of public education and engagement with them, or is it more a matter of, you know, a la carte based on, you know, this for this issue, this for this issue, this for this issue? What happens if a new member comes in with or an existing one with a particular idea that they want to put on the table? Where does that fall within that rubric of a greater strategy, or does that entail its own? There's a lot of questions that it could potentially raise. Those are just some thoughts that I had immediately in hearing that in response. Opening it up for anybody else and their thoughts. I see Jess's hand up first. Jess.
Okay, hi. And also just to build on that, and again, without trying to start a whole conversation at 9 o'clock about it, but I think it might also be worth addressing just our structural procedures for things. Like you mentioned, if we have different members who have different areas of interest, how do we decide what we focus on? Are we going to do it by vote? Is it just a general consensus? Do we look at anything? So even not only the substantive matter of what we're looking at, how we decide what we're going to look at and how we're making decisions, I think would also help streamline our processes.
Awesome comment. That was huge. Rick, you're off mute. Did you have one? And thank you, Ms. Schaefer. Mickey.
I just wanted to generally agree. I think my very first meeting that I came to back when we were in person, back in, you know, whenever, I said, well, what do we do? You know, where's our bite? Where's our power? So I definitely agree that it would be nice to have, you know, a little bit more authority, but I don't really have anything specific, and I've just enjoyed listening to everybody else kind of all agreeing at this point. So it'd be nice to find our feet somewhere.
Thank you, sir. Any other thoughts at the moment, Mr. Newton? I see you're off mute.
Yes, it's good to know that both Rick and Sean felt the same way I did 3 years ago when I joined, and they didn't have the benefit of this committee's or commission's conversation starting maybe 18 months ago, pretty much the same topic. So I think we all kind of have the same questions about what our purpose is and how best to use our time and talent going forward. So I think it's a good conversation. One of the things that I would like to see, I think, from the town is a little bit more guidance for all of its commissions that overlap. And so Clean Energy Commission, Bicycle Commission, our commission, there's a number of folks that are attacking different edges of the same problem. And it would be really great if we got some guidance really from town management, because honestly, we have to work through them, I think, to affect a lot of the things that we want to do from a strategy standpoint. So if it would behoove them to have one main council filled with people who do directives to smaller committees or commissions, that to me would make a lot of sense. And I think we've had that conversation several times, before. Just it hasn't gone. So if they're going to go, if Catherine's going to go in front of the town council and say, hey, we need more education, we need more efforts for recycling, let's say, or the Clean Energy Commission, presents this beautiful report of 24 pages, and we need to, and the town council gets behind it and says, yeah, that's a great idea. We need to do these things over the next 5 or 10 years. Well, how is that affected, and who leads the charge, and how is that done from a procedural and structural standpoint? So I don't know that we can solve the strategy question just by ourselves. I'd love to see some coordination among all the various commissions as well as the town structure on this.
Thank you, sir. Any others at the back to Mr. Daly.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner Daly here. Thanks, guys. Great input. Totally agree. I think one of the things that I would like to do, I'm sure all of us have been involved in creating strategy, either in our personal lives or our career in one way or the other. What I'd really, just to kind of give you the infrastructure, and Mr. Chairman, I don't know if we're allowed to do this, so please, let me know and keep me in bounds. But, obviously, when you're creating strategy, it requires you to be able to be brutally honest with ourselves, which could be an issue when you have meetings in a public forum. So I don't know if there's any type of executive committee session that we would be allowed to go into, but there is an exercise that has been very, very beneficial for when we're looking at have discussed. And what I usually do is get us to honestly think about what's our current state, right? Good and bad. What do we think about our current commission, our organization, what we do, what we don't do, so that we create some level playing field. Then we decide, what do we want to be? What's our future state? And whether that's a year, 2 years out, right? The term of the term limit of our commission, right? What does that future state look like? And it's brainstorming. So even if it seems outrageous, it's okay that we get it down. From there, we think about what would prevent us from getting from current state to future state. Why do we want to get there? What's preventing us from getting there? And from there, we get into then it immediately becomes apparent that there are 4 or 5 different action steps that we want to create that get to solving or resolving some of the issues that you're talking about. So that's the exercise I would love to kind of do with this commission. It usually takes an hour or 2 of time, so there's a little bit of work in it. But I think then, to your point, Ted, if we create this and we put this together first, and then we give it to the appropriate town organizations to have them look at and get their feedback from, I think then they can tell us whether or not we're going outside of the scope that they don't want us in, or whether or not we're actually giving them ideas they haven't thought of before.
Thank you, sir. Rick, we got your message that your battery is about to die, and thank you for reserving that for executive session in the form of the chat log. I have just mentioned it, however. I'm actually intrigued by the idea hashing, and it's only mildly stressful, of hashing all this out in front of the public view in terms of shaping this, because in that sense, it almost attracts more members of the public and their participation potentially when it comes to engagement with conservation environment. You never know. So we're going to find out, and this will be similarly tabled for a future agenda item. Do I take motions to adjourn our November 30th meeting?
Actually, Mr. Chair, I'd want to just point of
No motion. Go for it.
No, not a motion to close yet, but just point of clarification. Did we address agenda item number 2, which was the minutes from our October meeting?
You know what? Thank you, Mr.
We
Newman.
voted on them, so let's just make sure we get those done before Rick's battery dies, because we probably.
Thank you, sir. I will make the motion. Do we have a motion to approve? Well, actually, we're going to take that as the motion from Mr. Newton, if that works.
Okay. I motion.
Mr. Chairman, I believe I previously gave you one adjustment to the minutes.
You did, sir. And similar to the idea of you don't know how this works, I don't know how this works. When we've got posted minutes and yet an adjustment that was requested to them, however, it was minor typographical, I think it's completely fine. It was just the spelling of one person's name. So
I move to accept with the friendly amendment by Mr. Daly.
That's how we do it.
Second.
Thank you.
Original motion from Newton, motion to accept with amendment from Scott, and seconded by, who was that?
Me.
Rick.
Mr. Bush, for the sake of the minutes.
Emily Scott, yes, okay. Yeah.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None opposed. Motion passes. Do we have motion to adjourn?
I motion to adjourn.
Mr. Newton at 9:13 p.m. Second?
I second. Commissioner Daly.
Thank you, sir. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thanks, everybody. It was a great evening. Happy Monday, everybody.
Great job, Matt, as usual.
Thank you, everybody.
Everybody.
Bye.
All right.
See y'all.